Hello, welcome to Somerset News Network. A friend of mine sent me some graphs of the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Now, plants won't grow if the CO2 level drops below 150 parts per million. We are heading that way. 140 million years ago, we had 2,500 parts per million, and it's been sinking ever since. The argument goes by scientists today that actually the Industrial Revolution may have helped save the planet by producing CO2. Now, man's used fire for what, 50,000 years, maybe more? So we were burning wood to start with. Then we were burning charcoal. Then we were burning coal. We had steam engines after the 1800s, 1820s, 1830s. We industrialized then. Yes, there was pollution, but it's not CO2. It's all the other particulates that were wrong in those days. That's why you had the smogs in London, and we needed to clean up the environment. I got no problems with that. The problem I have is the lie, the big lie of zero carbon. They've got scientific papers that say we've got to go to net zero to save the planet. Well, who pays these scientists to come up with this crap? The politicians, our own governments. And if you're a scientist and you've got a job, a well-paid job, you're not going to say no to the money. And I've seen a lot of this over the last 10 years of scientific papers that fit the outcome that they want, not necessarily good science, in all sorts of areas. And I'm not a scientist, but if I can pick holes in a scientific paper and show where it's gone wrong, then these professors and doctors are scamming us with the money they get from the government. Net zero is a con. It's a scam. Now, this chart is from CO2 Coalition, an American-based website and information. So if you go onto CO2 Coalition, all the information is on there. It's absolutely fascinating. And they've got this chart, and it shows CO2 levels 140 million years ago, and it's dropping down to 300 parts per million today. Now, what happens if we go to net zero? Is that going to start falling to the 150 parts per million threshold, where life will no longer exist? Plants, trees, your vegetables in the garden, crops that farmers grow, all are carbon based. They take the carbon out of the atmosphere and produce the oxygen. We're carbon based life forms. So carbon is the most important building blocks of life. CO2 and oxygen is what we need. You can't get away with that. That's a scientific fact. But what happens? Why net zero? if the government are going to produce these plants to take out, or these, when I say plants, I mean industrial plants, to take out this CO2 out the atmosphere, it's going to cost millions. For what end? To reduce CO2 to a dangerous level, to kill life? My argument, looking at the science, is perhaps we ought to be producing more carbon. Well, the first thing we can do is stop all this net zero crap. It's a con. And I'll keep saying it. We have to look at the facts and go by the science, the proper science. Not by the scam science. So many areas scientists are being used by government. Now, the scientific method, John Locke produced it. John Locke was a doctor, a philosopher, and he went over, under James II, over to Holland. And he was helping to educate the Prince of Orange and Mary, his wife, who was the daughter of King James. When they came back to England after the Glorious Revolution, he came with them. He produced the scientific method. Now, I might have the sayings wrong, but this is the basic theory. You have a theory, and you think it up, and you say, right, this is what I think. So now you've got to prove your theory. So you come up with an experiment that will prove your theory. You write the results down, and then you come to a conclusion to prove your theory or not. That is the scientific method. A lot of these papers you read now on science are called discussion papers, because they're not real science. It's what they think. It's only the first part, the theory. But what happens is a scientist gets hold of it, who's in the same sort of gang. He's getting government money from his country, and they quote the scientific papers of his mate. And then somebody else writes a scientific paper and uses both of them. And then scientific discussion becomes scientific fact. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute. It isn't the way it's supposed to work. Other scientists are supposed to be able to produce and replicate the science to prove it or disprove it. Now, global warming is exactly the same. And I think this CO2 Coalition is something that's worth looking at. Once you've looked at it, then send the information you find to your MP. We have a Minister of Net Zero now, Ed Miliband. Ed Miliband is a Minister of Scam, of lies. So if you can persuade your MP that Mr. Miliband has got the wrong idea and is wasting our money when it could be spent on the NHS and police officers and firemen, do so. Just write him a letter and explain. Take the chart. The chart's on here. The chart's there. And I will put it on the Somerset News Network Facebook page. So you can download it and do what you like with it. Anyway, Ian, Somerset News Network, signing off. Net zero is a scam.